Yep. I'm starting recording. It's recording in case anyone wants to back out. This is the time.
Stop picking your nose.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we're at section 8.
That's right.
Ficus Severus. Lawrence is starting with the raising of the dead.
That's right. That's right. Well,
Or whatever.
the cutting down and then the raising.
Right.
But yes, that's right. Okay, so I'm going lo-fi here. I've got mine actually written out by hand, so excuse me if I don't manage to read my own handwriting. Yeah, I'm out of practice. Nec multo post, dum agrum lupicini, cuiestam honorati secundum seculum viri, praeteriret, clamore et luctu turbae plangentis excipitur. So, not long after, while Martin, Martin was crossing, I said the land, but a field, literally, of a certain Lupicinus, who was an honorable man by worldly standards. Martin was greeted by the wails and grief of a weeping crowd.
Good.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, am I allowed to have wails for clamore?
Everything except for singular.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, it was funny because I thought it should have been wails and tears of a grieving crowd, but there was kind of a hendiades going on there. Clamore et luctu. Okay. Ad quam cum solicitus ad stitisset et quis etset hic fletus inquiriret, indicator unum ex familia servulum laqueo sibi vitam extorsisse. So, at this, and then it should be when he stopped, but like that makes the sentence rather than cumbersome in English. So I just said, at this he stopped, perturbed, solicitus, and he inquired what, in brackets, was the reason for this weeping. What was this? Literally, what was this weeping? But what was the reason? Indicator. So it was pointed out to him, or rather, unum was pointed. No, yeah, it was pointed out to him. It's impersonal. I guess I would probably invent a subject there if I were translating it properly and say the crowd pointed to a servulum, a slave boy, ex familia from the household. Is household good for familia?
Yeah, sure.
Because obviously he's not related to Lupicinus.
Familia is the standard word for household. It actually doesn't really mean family in our
That's
sense.
what I thought.
Household.
Yeah. I'm going on Petrarch's familiar letters here.
It can even mean just the slaves of the household as opposed to the family.
Oh, that's good. I like servulum, a little slave boy. That was good. Anyway, the next bit's not quite so fun. Laqueo sibi vitam extorsisse. So they pointed to a slave boy who had wrenched himself from this life by means of a noose. So literally, he hanged himself. But,
wrenched his life.
Worse than that, it's wrenched life from himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, like okay, yeah, right. So he wrenched the life from himself. Okay, yeah, that's true. It is actually accusative. So he wrenched life from himself. There we go. By means of a noose. Okay. Quo cognito cellulam in qua corpus jacebat ingreditur exclusisque omnibus turbis superstratus corpori aliquantis per oravit. So, having learned this, I guess, having heard of this, Martin, again, we need a subject. Martin went into the storeroom, cellar, larder, I don't know, Pantry. How about pantry?
Just some little room, right?
Some little room, yeah,
It could be
right.
just a bedroom even.
Right, could be his bed.
Okay. The dictionary was telling me it was a storeroom if it was a kerulam rather than a. But maybe that's a classical thing.
Isn't this the word for like a monk's cell?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
it
is
is.
a word for himself, but I think that's a deliberate kind of self, like effacement or abasement, like we study in storerooms.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so he went into this little room, whatever it is, whether a storeroom or a bedroom, in qua corpus jacebat, in which the body was lying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And having sent away all the crowds, well, literally like closed them out, but anyway, superstratus corpori aliquantis per oravit. So, and having laid himself out, I would probably just say he laid himself out anyway, corpori, like on the body, he prayed for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Calula, I just looked up in the Oxford Latin. Basic meaning a small room or cell, but 1A is a slave's room.
Oh, well, there we go. No wonder the monks wanted to use it then. That's good. Okay, so it literally is the little kind of, that little servant's room. You see those in England still. There'll be like one enormous bedroom in a house and then a tiny little one.
Yeah.
Servants' quarters. Okay. Where was I? Is that all? I feel like I'm going really quickly. We usually take a lot longer than this, but anyway.
It's good. It's all good.
Okay. Mox vivescente vultu, marescentibus oculis in hora ilius defunctus erigitur. Lentoque conamine ensius ad surgere, apprehensa beati viri dextera impedes constitit. I think we can stop there, even though it's a colon, not a period. Mox vivescente vultu marescentibus oculis in hora, so rigitur.
With my internet, what is wrong with my internet?
Whose internet?
What's wrong with my internet?
We can't
My
see you.
internet's unstable.
Who's speaking?
Oh,
We see you.
I'm sorry. My internet went out.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. No.
Because you froze and we couldn't tell who you were. I mean, who was setting a-
Mox vivescente internet. Whatever that is in Latin. Yeah, okay. So yes, soon the dead man was revived, with his face coming back to life, and his eyes still heavy, with the still in there, in hora ilius, which apparently is like he looked at Martin's face. Ilius,
Right.
It is not him. It is somebody
There's
else.
a face of him. To the
Right, exactly. Right. So, but there's no verb of looking. It's just in order.
Right. No, but that's I don't know about your students, but my students would always want to just say on his face, because you see in, you forget that it reads and that it's got an accusative, and it's just so tempting to say on his face.
Yes, right.
It's
Yes.
anyway.
Yeah, no, I was definitely saved by the notes there from my
Isn't it really the dead man is lifted up into his face?
Yeah.
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 Soon with his face coming to life and his eyes still drooping.
Yeah.
Is
It's
it
very
not-
visual, sort of coming
Martin's face?
to him.
Sorry, we didn't hear you, Lawrence.
I'm trying to understand what Bruce said there. Like he's lifted up into Martin's face.
Yes, I think he's taking the
Yes.
Ilias
Yes, I think so.
irrigator, which makes sense. In other words, he lifted up right up into his face, with his face, his own wolfish,
He's lying on top of him,
and
the
his eyes still heavy. He's physically going up.
He's like almost pulled up to his countenance, to
Right.
Martin's countenance.
So it's not a metaphorical revive. It's quite a literal erigito. He's.
I think so.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of-
That makes sense.
Yeah, actually, that does. Yeah, I see now. So like he's kind of sitting up underneath Martin and kind of almost going.
He still needs another boost.
In his face.
Right.
I guess if Martin was lying on top of him, he wouldn't have very far to go, right?
Right.
Right.
He's
Right.
been
He hasn't
dead,
gotten
so.
up yet because we haven't gotten to Imperius Constitute yet.
Right.
Right.
So this is just him kind of like, jerking half awake out the coffin. In a classic vampire move. Yes. Maybe that's my Dante coming through there. Did I think of those things? All right. So soon the dead man sat up. We could even say. And yeah, but then you'd have to get a little bit creative with in order Idios if you can do that because Sulpicius is rather laconic about that. Okay. Lentoque conamine ensius ad surgere. Yeah. Yeah. So and
That word is anesis, right? Lento conamine anesis.
I'm sorry, I copied it down wrong.
Hmm.
Enisus, yes, because it's from enitor, right? Enisus. Okay. I'm sorry. My pencil was not to hand to correct it. Okay, lentoque conamine enisus ad surgere. Okay, so, and with literally slow effort, but I guess like a lot of effort is basically. He struggled to get up. With a lot of effort, he was struggling literally, with a lot of effort and having struggled to get up.
Right.
But he hasn't gotten up yet. That's the idea. So he's struggling to get up.
Right.
He needs apparenza beati viri dextera. He needs grasping that blessed man's right hand. Impedes constitute. He stood up on his feet, I guess. Okay.
Yep.
Atque itacum eo usque ad vestibulum domus turba omni inspectante processit. So then he proceeded with him in this manner, i.e. holding his right hand, I guess, as far as the entrance hall of the house, as all the crowd looked on.
Right. Good.
Yeah, because it's turba omni, yeah, it's all the crowd, not
Right.
the crowd.
Right. They've been shut out at the end of sentence 2, and now he's bringing them out so they can be included.
The crowd are a good character in Sulpicius. They seem to be very important. What the crowd's up to.
Well, presumably they provide the witnesses.
Witness.
Exactly. Yeah. He's always very careful. But then there's this he always shuts them out when he's actually going to do the miracle, which is kind of fun.
I think
Can't see my methods. They're patented.
So you think he really just poked him pins rather of him?
It feels like he probably warmed his body up a little bit and kind of got his heart going again by more or less context. But yeah.
It's kind of a recap of the previous story.
Yeah.
He
He gets really physical with them. It's not just the kind of
he stretches himself out on the body both times.
Yeah.
Prays a little while.
Like when Christ is a miracle, it's just he just touches.
Yeah, this is taking laying on of hands to furthest extreme, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. He's literally. Can you imagine going and throwing yourself on a dead corpse?
I hope it hasn't
Kind
been
of like
dead
giving
too
somebody
long.
Well, it was a recently dead corpse.
Somebody that life to life, the mouth to mouth resuscitation. We do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's true. I wonder if that's kind of what in ora ilios erigitur is actually referring to. It's a little bit of the kiss of life going on there.
You could take all the miracle out of it, right?
Well, it's still pretty good to even if the guy was only half dead to bring him back after he's
I
tried
mean, maybe one person took a CPR class and just
Right.
totally, but
That's right. Yeah, well, the miracles of medicine. There we go.
And to take the miracle out of it further, I have learned for reasons I won't go into, it's still in the 21st century not necessarily simple to tell whether someone is actually dead.
That's true. That's a very good point. In fact, we've made it harder by relying on brain death rather than.
And what kind of death? Heart death or brain death or all of that, right?
Yeah, and because in medieval medicine, if your heart is stopped, you're dead. There's no question about that. But
even the heart stopping. I mean, I worked at a hospital for many years, and the heart stopping doesn't mean anything. You still have vital signs for hours sometimes. What happens is they're very subtle. The machines get them, but nobody else gets them. Usually they tell the family the person's dead. You still have a lot of vital signs going on for 2-3 hours.
Wow.
But they just know there's no way back to living for some vital signs by then.
Yeah. And I guess in this case, when someone's actually hanged themselves, you usually give it to them that they managed.
It depends on how well they did it. If they got all oxygenation to the brain, yes. But if they did not, then probably not. I mean, if you still have circulation to the brain, you still have a chance to live. The problem is if you successfully cut the whole blood flow to the brain.
He probably was unconscious but not dead, as it were.
come to think,
The previous guy had been dead for 3 days. I consider that pretty extreme, right? We don't know how long this guy was dead, but the previous one had been dead for a while.
I will say there's a lot of skepticism over this guy, whether he was really dead. And of course, the medieval audience would have had some level of skepticism. So you're saying it's so dramatic, him being on top of the corpse and all of these things. And I feel like that's in many ways for that skepticism, saying that he's very zealous in his actions and he's praying and he's going through these motions in a very zealous way. And that says the holiness of what he's trying to accomplish for that skeptical crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So
I actually wanted to know why the guy wanted to kill himself. That was the
Interesting story they didn't tell us.
I know. It's like, it's just like taking his right. Oh yes, it's slave way. Of course he's trying to kill himself. I mean,
but it's a sin to kill yourself. So if him resurrecting him is protecting him from the sin of killing himself.
that's true.
So.
Yes. No. Oh no. He's on his way to hell if he if Martin doesn't come in there.
Or at least Martin thinks.
Yes. Right.
We don't know whether or not these people are.
If he was grateful.
His household is Christian or not, do we?
Oh, that's a good point. I guess we don't know that. You're right.
It's also Martin's concern about the lowly, about the low people, like giving his cloak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The
True.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Jen's left. I assume Jen doesn't have any grammar.
My dog was eating something she shouldn't have been eating.
I may have to check out at some point, but I'll stick around to hear at least the next bit.
Okay, sure. Bruce, do you want to take it away? So we're at the beginning now of section 9.
Right. Okay. Like Maria, I'm having I'm getting messages about internet instability, which is comforting because I'm not the only thing that's unstable in this room right now. But if I stop, just make me do it again. Sub idem feret ad episcopatum Turonicae ecclesiae petebatur. Sed lui monasterio suo.
You're dying on us.
E civibus.
Bruce, we didn't get that.
Yeah, that was.
Starting
From said.
You're fading in and out.
said.
Now he's faded completely.
I'm back.
He's back.
You're back.
Sed cum erui monasterio suo non facile posset, rusticius quidam, unus ex civibus, uxoris languore simulatu, ad genua ilius provolutus ut eggreditur obtinuit.
Much better.
Was it egrederator, wasn't it?
Refrigerator, yes.
Eggreditor, sorry.
Yeah.
So, at the same time, Martin was sought for the episcopacy of the Church of Tours, or was sought to be Bishop of Tours.
Mm-hmm.
Almost at the same time.
Yeah, they're almost the same. Fair.
Almost at the same almost at the same time.
Yeah. Which is basically a way of saying not long after, isn't it?
Well, and I looked at that sub for a while. I think this might be sub meaning just immediately afterwards. So like immediately
Right.
after that time.
Because
That
I
would-
did
that would
I
make
did
the best sense.
I was a little surprised at sub tempus, but apparently that's absolutely standard classically
Mhm.
at the sub tempus at the time.
Well, it would usually mean just before that time.
Well, that I didn't get. Okay. Oh, okay.
It's usually subplot as a time expression does usually mean just at that time or just before that time, but I think here it must mean immediately
Must
after.
be just after, right? That makes more sense.
Yeah, because otherwise you wouldn't have gotten there yet.
'Cause if it just said Aodem,
Still be in a field somewhere.
at the same
Right,
time.
that would be at the exact same time. Yeah.
And that would be with an ablative.
And he's clearly he's gone back home, as that's what the next clause tells us, right? But since he could not easily be uprooted from his monastery, a certain Rusticius,
Great name.
one of the citizens, meaning of Tours, I assume, sickness of his wife having been pretended, or in English, under the pretense that his wife was sick, having cast himself down at his knees, that is, Rusticius has cast himself down at Martin's knees, slightly old-fashioned could say, obtained that he came out, convinced him that to leave.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Take it.
Okay, so far?
Good.
Ita dispositis iam in itinerare civium turbis, sub quadam est custodia ad civitatem usque deducitur. And thus with the crowds of the citizens arranged already along the pathway. In other words, they seem to have come out and made a lineup along the path from the monastery into the city. Right?
Yep.
He was led all the way to the city under a certain escort. In other words, hello? Under a certain escort. It sounds like, in effect, they were afraid that he would try to break and run for it any moment. You know,
Yeah,
you'd get him out of the cell, but where would he go next? So they're all lined up along the pathway, and somebody got him by the hand.
Right. Super.
Or maybe they already know there's hostilities from the higher up.
Another possibility, yeah, that he's under guard for his own protection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deduco is the standard word for escorting someone somewhere, specifically to the forum, usually. So, like, if there's something going on that you would need to take someone with a company of people. That is the verb we would use.
Is that for a legal proceeding or
You can use
business?
it for, I'm fairly sure it's for legal proceedings. I know you use it for when a boy's gonna do the toga of manhood thing. You deduco him, like it's that.
When you're going down to canvass for an election, you get your friends will deduco.
Yeah.
Okay. So actually, since this is kind of an election, that's quite appropriate.
Yeah, I don't think they're protecting him. I think they're keeping him from running away because he
Right,
doesn't.
right.
You know, this is this whole theme of reluctant.
Yeah. Well, that's the way I read it the first time, but what Jen says about deducere is interesting.
Yeah. So he was led to the city almost as if he were under guard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Is this an entourage, or is this someone to keep him from running away into the woods?
I think he's got all of these people watching him go to tour,
Right.
and he doesn't think he can decline, right? I mean, you know, I don't think there's any evidence that anyone ever was killed. You know, it was never violent. It was just pressure, right? Augustine, Paulinus of Nola, they just get made bishops or priests when they don't want to be, you know, especially if they're rich. Like Paulinus is passing through Barcelona as a rich man, and they just say, you gotta be I can't remember, you know, and then he just actually leaves, which you're not supposed to do. Whereas Augustine, you know, turned up in Hippo, they made him bishop, and he felt he had to stay. And clearly Martin is doing that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I take it that there's, later in the section, there is some sense of menace. And this is, of course, 200 years later, but in Gregory of Tours, who's talking about, you know, who's from this part of the world, who's from this town. You know, 200 years later, these episcopal and also abbatial in Manana's Minister, elections could get violent. Maybe not so much in the 4th century.
I didn't think it was. I didn't take this as violence, but
no, I took it as they were afraid he would run away.
Right. And even the objections that we're going to come to, I took it more. They were just saying we don't really want him as a bishop. They weren't saying we're going to kill that son of a bitch. You know.
Yeah.
No rise to that, as far as I can see. But
yeah, that was my first inclination. To think that he's got a guard for reasons other than his own safety.
Right.
So
that's why it says quadam, right?
Right. Yeah. Some kind of guard or another. Yeah.
Yeah.
A sort of guard.
Sort of,
Latin.
But the quadam is very important, I think. Very. Mirum in modum, I think we're right.
Mirum in modum.
Mirum in modum. Incredibilus multitudo non ex illo opido, but etiam ex viciniis urbibus.
Urbibus.
Viciniis urbibus.
Am I there?
You're there.
Yeah,
you cut out.
Etiam ex viciniis urbibus ad suffragia ferenda convenerat. So, in a marvelous way, an unbelievable crowd, not only from that city, meaning Tours, but even from neighboring cities, had come together to cast their votes. And this is apparently suffragia fere is apparently a standard classical idiom for this.
Isn't it nice how you used to get to vote for the bishop?
Well,
yes.
Yeah.
Before the papal authority thing happened, yeah.
Yeah, so some stuff has changed for the worse, I'm afraid. There. Anyway.
You think it'd be nice if we had popular elections for bishops?
I think it'd be great, yeah, because
with no campaign restrictions on campaign contributions.
That's right.
Oh, there you go.
With super PACs and everything.
Right. You get packs having people pick their bishops. I mean, it
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No.
Because, synods are individuals. We can look at it that way.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess I'm just reflecting on quite how detached the hierarchy is from the people in the modern Catholic Church.
Sure.
It's quite It's especially in the States. So like having come over from England where they don't print stuff about abortion in every single week's newsletter. I'll just say that.
Would you like
to what you're saying, Lawrence? I think we should move on.
Yeah, I know. There was quadam. I might need quadam custodia if I'm not careful.
No, you won't.
All right.
Would you like me to take it?
Yeah, Joanna, do you want to take it? That'd be great.
Sure.
Yes.
Una omnium voluntas, eadem vota, eadem quae sententia, Martinum episcopatus esse dignissimum. So and you have to understand erat. There was one will of everybody, of all of them. One desire and one opinion, namely that Martin was most worthy of the bishopship, of the episcopate.
Eadem vota, I took as the same vote.
The same.
I took it as plural, the same wishes.
Same wish. Oh.
Yeah, votum.
Plural.
Oh, right.
Prayers.
Yeah, the same.
Yes.
The same desires, vows,
but it
wishes,
can-
prayers,
yeah.
even.
Right.
It can mean wishes as well.
Yeah.
It's just a hendiatrus anyway. Like it's just he's saying the same
Yeah,
thing.
voluntas covers it, right?
Yeah,
Right.
right.
It's a tricolon.
Mm-hmm.
Tricolon as well. It's both of those things. A tricolon isn't always the same thing. So it's a hendiatrus because they all mean the same thing. So he's saying it the same thing 3 ways, as opposed to tricolon, which is just three nice clauses put together.
Is that a hendiatus when you say the same thing 3 times?
Yeah, no, it's not.
Hendiatrus with a tr. Yeah. Hendiatus.
Well, this is really more
Hendiatrus
when you're trying to express one idea, but by using 2 related ideas.
Right.
Like, instead of saying dinner, to say bread and tables. It's not really just to have synonyms. The idea is to have 2 things that combine to make.
Yeah, right. But I mean,
Variatio. Yeah.
I don't. I see what you're saying, but these are also, 3 things that mean roughly the same thing, but that are combining to be something. I don't know what the other thing is, but it's like it's a nice way of saying it.
Definitely rhetorical. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah. So it's
All right.
3 into 1.
That Martin was most worthy of the episcopacy. Felicem fore tali ecclesiam sacerdote. That the church would be very lucky. Would be lucky with such a priest, a bishop.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Pauci tamen et non nulli ex episcopis qui ad constituendum antistitem fuerant evocati impie repugnabant dicentes scilicet contemptibilem esse personam indignum esse episcopatu hominem vultu despicabilem vestes sordidum crine deformem. However, a few people, and not and several of the bishops who had been called out to set up to install a chief priest, a bishop, impiously fought back. Were fighting back. What's that? Oh,
That was just random. Keep going. You're doing great.
Okay. Saying, namely, that his person was contemptible,
Mm-hmm.
and that a man was unworthy of the episcopacy, a man despicable, to be despised in his face. In other words, he had a bad-looking face, dirty of clothing, and wild of hair. That he looked really wild and crazy, probably like John the Baptist or somebody, and so he was not worthy to be a bishop.
I think the idiomatic translation here is "and with tragic hair."
Tragic.
Bad hair.
A bad hair day.
A much later wandering preacher and monastic founder that I've worked on is described by one of his critics as having hair and beard such that you really couldn't tell whether he was coming or going.
Yeah, so he must have been quite a sight, but then the people loved him for it, apparently.
Hey, he's one of us.
Sounds like a hipster to me. Like a bush.
Yeah.
That's about right.
He would have been cool by today's standards, probably.
Well, by 20 years ago, maybe.
Looks like half of my neighbors.
All right, good. No grammar critique, no nothing.
Those are all, last three things are all ablatives of specification.
Yes.
Perfect.
You mean the Despicabilum, the Wultu and the Westphalian? Yeah.
Yeah, has anyone got a better translation for that bit? Just indignum esse episcopatu hominem vultu despicabilum. As in, like, is it? I guess I wasn't clear if it's he is to be despised to his face. Is that what it is?
Sort of clothes, to be despised of face, despicable of face. I mean, that's not good English, but
maybe with respect to his face.
Despicable of face, dirty of clothing, and disgraceful as the hair.
But are they saying a man or this? Is it like is hominem Martin or like abstract?
No, it's Martin. It's saying that he was a contemptible person and that a man was unworthy of the bishop who was bishopric, who was despicable, etc., etc.
Which is both Martin and not Martin at the same time to go.
Yeah, I think it is coming to be a little more abstract to say, and he was, and a man who was this way. In general, any guy who was this way would be not worthy of the
Yeah.
But it is referring to him.
Yeah. That right. Hominem being almost like an impersonal.
Yeah, almost a generalization, right?
Okay, great.
That's better.
Move on to section 4, chapter 4, sentence 4, whatever. Maria Stella, you want to way?
Yes. Ita populo sententia senioris aec illorum in risa dementia est, qui lustrem virum dum vituperare cupiunt predicavant. Let's see. So this folly was made fun of by the people of sounder thinking or sounder mind, who were since or as they were praising an illustrious man while they wished to condemn him.
Right. Francese has a note on this which is very helpful, and I think it's important to know that the antecedent of qui is illorum. That the people are condemning the craziness of those people who are praising him while they really want to insult him behind his back. I think
so probably better, like as the ones who wished to condemn him were praising the illustrious man or something like that.
Because they were pointing out how hipster he looked, how John the Baptist-y he looked.
Well, they were being two-faced, right? They were saying he was okay, but they really wanted to say bad things about him behind his back.
Oh, see, I thought I took this differently.
Oh.
I thought it was that, the Sani or Pars
Yeah.
mocked the dementia of those who the folly. That was beautiful. I love
Right.
folly.
Folly.
Of those who, in trying to scorn him, were actually praising him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were saying how he was all ascetic, and therefore, because he looked so awful, he shouldn't be a bishop.
Right.
We're praising him
Aesthetic,
by
That was actually a point in his favor.
Yeah.
That's way better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Excellent. I found that the single hardest sentence we've had for a long time. I don't.
Yeah, that's a tough one. The qui, it's just the qui, like,
Right.
It is.
and the two verbs together.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. Nequedo aliud is facere liquid, quam quod populus domino volente cogitabat. Nor in truth or truly was it licit for them to do otherwise or to do anything other than what the people were thinking by means of the will of God, or because of the will of God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was really tricky.
Is
Does that
le-
sound kind of okay?
It's an ablative absent, right? So domino volente, with God being willing, like with God willing it.
Oh, like God willing. They were, okay.
But not in our sense. Not if God was willing, but
No, because.
God having will.
Because God willed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Is liquid to be allowed?
Mhm.
Okay.
Liket.
Look at in person.
I heard. My
It
internet.
couldn't go against the vote.
I guess, yeah, licit is kind of a literal translation, yeah. Not was it allowed for them to.
Yeah, they didn't get what
Against
they
the will of
wanted.
the people.
Okay.
Good. Keep going.
Okay. Inter episcopos tamen qui adfuerant praequipue defensor, quidam dicitur restitise. Yet, among the bishops who had been present, a certain defensor, or a certain one called defensor, is said to have been particularly resistant. Unde animadversum et graviter illum lectione prophetica tum notatum. Whence or from where it had been noticed or it was observed at the time that he was severely judged by the prophetic reading.
Good. Very good. That's a hard sentence too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it was observed at the time that because he had presented resistance, that he was severely judged. But the prophetic reading thing is really tricky.
That comes next. That
Because
gets
it's in the
explained.
future. It
Right.
hasn't happened yet.
Right. So the whole explanation of what you've just translated comes in section 5, introduced by Nam.
Yeah, no. I know what I mean. It's more like prophetic reading sounds so awkward. Like by the reading of the prophets or something like that would sound more elegant, because the prophetic reading sounds like
Somebody was predicting something about him, saying something.
It's true. I mean, do we think prophetic reading means anything other than just from the psalm that we're going to talk about, or is it prophetic?
I think it does.
Hmm?
I think this is because I think what happens later on is basically the guy who's going to do the reading, because the regular lector isn't there, sticks his finger in a Bible, and this is the first thing he comes to. So prophetic in that sense.
It is prophetic in that sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
that's a common practice of I don't remember the name in Latin, but just opening the Bible and sticking your finger and finding
Yeah.
something is a way to allow God to tell you what He wants
Oh,
to
yeah.
tell you.
Right.
Mhm.
That's how Augustine gets converted. The book of Letters of Paul, throws it open.
Right.
Wait, what did you just say, Lawrence?
That's how Augustine gets converted.
Oh,
Tony
right, yeah,
Legge.
right.
Tony Legge, yeah.
Tony
Yeah,
Legge picks
that's
up the Letters of Paul and just
Yeah,
opens
that's the most famous Christian example of all, probably.
Yeah.
Didn't you do this in classical pagan religions too sometimes?
No?
Whip out a book and find something and say, this is what...
Well, you need to have a codex in order to be able to do it.
That's true.
Yeah, but you need, but
Better.
you don't need one whole...
Traditions
Right.
of necromancy, obviously the thing you're going to think of are the Sibylline books.
Bruh.
Mhm.
So that
true.
tradition of associating books with prophecy goes way, way back.
Right. But did they read them at random? Did they
I
just,
believe that's how they
they
could
just open them up and say, let's see?
Well, wouldn't they have been scrolls? So it's
Right, they may have been, but you could still.
it's much more difficult to do that with the scroll.
Right,
You know?
it's true. It's true. Technology makes it much easier to.
Yeah, it's the yeah.
I mean, famously, they do it with Virgil in the Middle Ages, right?
Right.
You know,
But this is not a Christian invention. I'm almost...
that may,
Oh.
okay.
Yeah, it's a good question though, because the codex is because the codex is definitely like posterior to Christianity, so it's kind of difficult to disentangle.
It becomes
It's not entirely clear to me that, for instance, Severus would have been that this would have been necessarily a codex that they were using in the Church of Tours.
400.
Well, I don't think it would have been. Yeah.
At least they probably wear loose leaves
Right.
piled on top of one another. It's not a bound codex.
Could also have been, but it could also have been scrolls.
But
This being only the late 4th century.
But the Christian scriptures get codex, whatever the verb is, get made into codex much earlier than anything else, right?
Is that right?
Yeah.
Where it
For
starts.
devotional reasons, like you can carry it around,
Right.
you can flip through it, all these kind of like things, like it's
Exactly.
like
Yeah. So
technology is kind of tied up with the religion or something.
anyway, this makes perfect sense that it's a codex, it seems to me.
Mhm.
But anyhow,
Yeah.
It does.
I'm gonna have to check out now, guys. But thank you very much.
good to see you.
All right, Lawrence.
Yeah, I'll yeah,
Bye.
Bye.
and thank you. Have a great week.
Let's watch him disappear.
How do I do that? Oh, there's a lead. Here we go. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Quite spooky. I really find that still kind of scary. Just poof, they
Disappear.
disappear, you know. Great, Maristella. So, Masha,
Yes.
you want to pick it up at 5?
Absolutely. So, nam cum fortuito lecto cui legendi eo Dei officium erat interculusus e populo diffusit turbiatis ministris dum
A populo defuisset turbatis ministris.
Thank you. Thank you. Dum expectator qui
Expectator.
qui non ederat unus e
Eo
circumstantibus sumpto posilitario quim saltario quim primum versum invenit eripuit.
Invenit.
Venit. Thank you. The Latin pronunciation. Gracious.
You know what? If you go to the Dickinson website, Chris Francesi reads the whole thing, and
He does.
he reads very nicely.
Yeah.
I will look that up. I really will.
Slowly, and I also think Maristella reads very nicely, and I think having that kind of Mediterranean accent, and Lawrence too, with that Italian accent that he's got, is also really nice. But just straightforward American calm. Start with that.
Mm-hmm.
Move towards that more
Well, that's kind of what Joanna does, and it sounds really good.
It does sound right. It does sound really good. So you can even read Latin nicely with an American accent. I think Francese's got a whiff of Italian thing, which
I think it really helps to understand it. It actually helps to understand it as a language.
It really
Absolutely.
totally does. And I think especially simple Latin, one really good way I think of really cementing your knowledge of Latin is just to listen to it independently of preparing. So, you just like if you make recordings, if you keep them around, put them on your iPod, put them in your car. I found I did this when I first started teaching. I had to teach Latin poetry, and I would just listen to little bits of it, like 5 minutes, or just like it's a red light, listen to a note of Horace. And it would just sort of filter into your brain in a different way, and it really helps. Anyway.
When you started teaching Horace, William, there were no iPods.
There were. I made a cassette recording of an LP that I found in the library.
That's what you had, cassettes, right? That's what we had in those days.
But I had them in my car, and I would just listen to them for as long as I could stand it, which wasn't for very long. It was 5 or 10 minutes, and then you switch over to something else. But it really helped me get the feel of Latin, because I was terrified when I was first teaching Latin that I had to read aloud and try and convey the oral thing, which I'd never done before as a student. So it really helps.
Yeah, and Chris Francese's reading is beautiful.
So it's right there on the Dickinson website if you're interested.
Well, thank you very much for the suggestion. I will look into it. Okay, so
I'm sorry, Masha. Another thing that's really easy to do, but actually does help with oral Latin, is the news in Latin that the Finnish
radio station
does, the Nunti Latini, because they're reading, obviously it's not American, it's Finnish, but they're really, really good at distinguishing the vowel quantities, which is, I think, super hard for Americans to do. And they're really good at it. It's not very long. They do it every Friday. It's on their website. They've been doing it for like 25 years.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah. And I know my upper level kids love doing the news on Fridays, so they have transcripts too, so you don't have to just listen to it.
I will look into that, absolutely.
I'm just trying to imagine
the oral.
I'm trying to imagine Latin with a Finnish accent.
It's fabulous.
It sounds vaguely odd. You can't tell that it's Finnish. It
does sound odd, and they do a couple of the pronunciations are non-classical. But
what is the URL for this?
It's what the Finnish radio. It's YLE, and if you Google Nuntii Latini, it's the first thing that'll come up.
Thank you. I'm really interested in this.
It's also a podcast. You can get it as a podcast.
Yep. And it comes out on Fridays.
A great idea.
So I do it with my kids, but I go through ahead of time and I give them like notes and comprehension.
Oh, so you do this. So you do this, say, with anybody past first year Latin every week?
3 and 4. So once we've gotten to indirect statements and ablative absolutes.
What a great idea.
You can't do it with indirect statements and ablative absolutes.
Right.
So-and-so said that, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Yeah.
But, and there'll be some modern vocabulary my kids won't know, so I always go through and gloss it first and do comprehension questions and look up the stories myself if I wasn't familiar with them. But the kids really like it, and they're like, what's going on in Finland this week? What's going on in Finland?
What a great idea for teaching. That is just, William and I have said this to each other, but boy, are your students lucky.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's true, Jen. All right, we're keeping Masha from translating.
Okay. 4, when accidentally or fortuitously the lector, by whom the service of reading on this day must be done, had been absent, hindered by the people, with the ministers disturbed while he who was not present was expected. One of the bystanders, with the psalter he took, seized upon the first verse he found. Am I? Yes?
go back a little bit. Most of it was really, really good. But if you go back to the cui clause.
Yes, is that I translated that as a gerundive of obligation because that cui is a dative. Oh, it's not. Okay, I'm sorry.
So the cui is actually a dative of possession.
It's a dative possession. Okay.
Whose officium it was on that day, and the legendi, it's not a gerundive. It's a gerund.
It's gerund.
It's a gerund.
It goes
Okay.
with officium.
Okay.
So-
Okay. Because I knew that there.
So it's the officium legendi, the duty.
Of reading.
Okay. So okay. So that would translate as he was his service,
It
and
was
then
a duty.
The duty.
duty, right? Duty, service, and then for them, meaning the public. Is that what you're saying? Possession.
Yes, it's him. Literally, this is to whom there was the duty of reading on that day, on that
Mhm.
same day.
Yes. Okay.
So
To
whose
whom there was a
duty it
duty.
was to read that day.
Right.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so to whom there was the duty to read that day.
Mhm.
And then he had been absent, and then the interclusus a populo, I had that as hindered by the people, but I was wondering why it can't be cut off from the people. But the translations all had it as hindered or, halted or stopped, but couldn't it also be like cut off from the people?
Shut out from having.
Possible. I took it in the first sense just because it sounds like there are an awful lot of people hanging around.
Right.
Yes.
So basically, he
Makes more
couldn't,
sense. I
couldn't
think
make his way through the crowd.
right. I think cut off from the people just doesn't
It's not as likely.
fit the context. I think you're right. It could mean that.
Okay, I just wanted to get an idea of exactly why they chose hindered, but it makes sense because if you have a lot of people, you're going to be hindered to get to where you need to be. Okay. Is there anything else about the translation? I know there's like two absolute ablatives and they really kind of mess with the flow a little, but
Right. So did you get sumpto saltario? That's an ablative absolute too?
yes, I
Okay.
did with the postler he took, or with the postler having been taken up.
Right.
The salter.
One of those standing around,
Right,
the sculptor having,
right.
bingo.
Good.
Okay. So would you like me to continue on?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that psalm was, out of the mouth of infants and sucklings,
Yeah.
you have perfected.
You gonna do Latin?
Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. Salmus autem hic erat ex oro infantium et lacantium perfecisti laudem propter inimicios tuos, exactly, ut destrues inimicum et defensorum. Defensorum. Okay, now that psalm was, out of the mouth of infants and sucklings, you have perfected praise for the sake of your enemies, so that you may destroy the enemy and the defender or defensor.
Yes. Good.
Okay. And that's Psalm 8:3.
Yes, though Francesi notes this. Vulgate doesn't have the word defensor there.
No, it has ultiorum.
Right.
Ultiorum.
Right. And I don't know whether the commentary that I read, there's this very learned French commentary, says this is net evidence for a different kind of Bible, for the pre-Vulgate Bible.
Yeah, the Psalms is actually one of the last things that Jerome translated early in the 5th century. So Jerome's which is only quasi-canonical anyway, the Psalms somehow. Anyway, I think it's about 99% certain that Sulpicius would not have had access to anything but the so-called Vetus Latina, the Old Latin Bible, which was mainly a translation out of a Greek Bible that had been done before.
Is this why earlier and later he uses defensor Because I noticed there's a theme. He doesn't use ultim or avenger at all. He has this consistent defensor. Is that why he chose defensor, or did he choose defensor because of by transmitting this verse into defensor?
It's the point of the whole story, really, because it's the name of the guy.
Name of the guy.
Right. So there's like a parallel there.
Right.
That verse was chosen because it contained that word, and it was his name.
Right.
Plainly showing that he was.
So you said 8:3, right? Because in the canonical Vulgate, it is indeed inimicus et ultor.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, I wondered whether they could just have heard the word ultor and said, "That reminds me of this guy defensor."
I bet it's Vetus Latina. I bet it's Bible. I think. Yeah, I can go look that up.
Anyway, we get the point. It's a fun story.
We get the point.
Keep going, Masha.
Quo lector clamor populi tollitur pars diversa confunditur. Confunditur. The clamor of the people was raised by this having been read. The opposite group was confused.
Confounded.
Confounded, yes.
Even perplexed.
And one translation I saw had shamed, that they were so confused they were downright shamed.
Oh.
So,
Yeah, confunditur really is much more grave than just confused.
Right.
It means they were almost damned or put down.
Yeah, confounded in the kind of
Confounded in the biblical sense.
in the King James sense.
Let me never be confounded.
Right, oh Lord, in thee have I trusted.
Let me never be confounded. Right.
Yeah.
Anglican liturgy.
Outbreak of Episcopalianism here.
Huh? I'm a lapsed Episcopalian, darn it.
Aren't we all? But it has to be.
Why don't Protestants get to be lapsed, I want to know.
Let's not get distracted.
Sorry.
Keep going. You're on a roll.
Aque ita habitum est divinio nuto psalmum hunc lectum fuisse ut testimonium aporis sui defensor audierit qui ex ore infantium atque infantium, thank you, lactantium in Martino Domini laude perfecte et ostentius turiter ostensus, please excuse me, et destructus esset inimicus. Okay. And thus it was thought that this psalm had been read by divine will, so that the defender might hear the testimony of his works, the witness of his works.
Yeah.
He who out of the mouth of infants and sucklings had been both shown as an enemy and destroyed, the Lord's praise having been perfected in Martin.
Good.
Praise.
Great.
Right. Good. Sorry. Fast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just can't construe that quickly. It's just.
Well, admittedly, the end part, it just seems, it goes because you know it goes, but it does seem to be kind of added on. But it's part of that out of the mouths of infants and that perfected just in symmetry to the psalm.
Yeah.
But
I know it seems like there was consensus that sentence with dementia was hard, but I thought these two were actually quite difficult. So, brava, Masha.
thank you.
Great.
I enjoyed it.
Bob, you ready to keep going?
Okay.
All right,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, section 10.
Okay. Jam vero simpto episcopatu, qualem se contuntur praestitere, non est nostrae facultatis evolvere. Now indeed, with the episcopacy having been taken up, it is not in our ability to unroll, unfold, of what kind and how great a bishop he stood out. Idem enim constantissime perseverabit, qui plus fuerat. He steadfastly persisted as the same person who had earlier been.
Yep. Good.
For Preisto, with the say, you probably want to take that instead of stood out as something more like he showed himself to be. Like what sort and how great he showed himself as.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it might also be kind of a sense of excelling, like how, in what way he excelled as a bishop, but
it got that say there.
like, okay.
Yeah. Offered himself, sort of showed himself.
And I think as Volvere is described is perfectly okay. You know, unroll, layout, but even describe, just it's not in my. It is not in my skill set, right?
Yeah.
I thought Volvere was the reference to unrolling a scroll, kind of relating.
Probably originally that's how it worked.
Yeah, but I think it just then means to unroll a tale or unfold a tale.
Yes.
It's like explicare.
Right.
Yes, good.
Something.
Good.
Okay. Edem in porta eius humilitas, edem investitu eius vilitas erat. There was the same humility in his heart, and the same cheapness in his clothing. Plenus autoritatis et gratiae, in plebat episcopi dignitatem, ut nuum tamen propositum monachi virtutemque desererat. And in this way, full of authority and favor, he filled the dignity of the bishop, which the Lord say means he fulfilled the office in such a way that he did not desert his plan of being a monk and virtue. But I wasn't sure if that was hendiadys or not. Fulfilled the plan or the virtue of being, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, propositum in post-Augustan Latin can mean really way of life. And this is a word that's very often used to refer to monastic or eremitic, the life of hermits. A propositum is really a way of life or a lifestyle, although that word didn't exist in English until circa 1974.
I guess I also thought if virtue was separate from the lifestyle of being a monk, it was kind of a criticism of the bishops because it said he wasn't deserting being virtuous.
Although you might have been
it might also just be the power of monastic life, the impact.
I found the plenus auctoritatis et gratiae echoes John, full of grace and truth.
Yeah, and I think it really is grace in the theological sense there.
Just a verbal echo there.
Yeah.
Of the Bible.
Good.
Aliquam ergo adhaerenti ad ecclesiam cellula usus est. Thus for a while he made use of a cell adjoining the church. Then cum inquietudinem se frequentantium fere non posset, vobus fere extra civitatem milibus monasterium sibi statuit. And then, when he was not able to bear the disquietude of the crowds of visitors, he set up for himself a monastery almost nearly 2 miles outside of the city.
Good.
Great.
And
That ad hyrentem ad ecclesiam, historical / architectural note. This may well refer to something that happened from very early on in the Christian world, which is it's literally adhering to the church. That is to say, you would build you'd put a couple of holes and a couple of posts in the side of the church and just build a little shelter.
Like
And
Julie
lots
Norwich's.
Yes, I was about to say her.
Lived this way across the Middle Ages. There are actually some churches that remaining from the 11th and 12th centuries where you can see the holes in the wall. It must be there because there were originally beams stuck into them. So this may be a quite literal adhering to the church.
Is Julian still there? Julian of Norwich?
I think it is. Years
thought it
ago,
was.
somebody had visited, and I think she said she saw it.
Yeah, I think you can still see it.
Sorry, where was that? I froze.
Julian of Norwich, England.
Yeah,
It's a
could
14th
well
century
be.
anchorite.
Yeah, yeah. There are some, and there's some even older than that are kind of almost certainly, because we've got the holes in the wall and a record of there being a hermit or a recluse or somebody being on the property.
Great.
In that little phrase, the Denquam inquietudinem se frequentantium, Bob, I think you left out the word say, and you said crowds. I think you might have said of visitors, which is great, but you want to make sure to include the say of people visiting him.
Good point.
But
Yeah. Okay, great. Are we on to Mona?
This is section.
I thought it was Save Ferret. Sorry, Jen. I thought it was not Save
No,
Frequentantium, but Save Ferret non posset.
no, it can't go with the ferry. That's complementary with posset.
Yeah, it has to be.
Right.
That's right.
Say non posset ferret. Right.
Yeah. But I didn't catch that say, so.
When he was not.
The say can't possibly go with ferry because it's the same
It
as
would have to be, it was not possible for him to bear, but
Yeah, it's the ACI. It's the accusative infinitive. Non posset.
I mean, I suppose.
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't have say as a subject of ferry after posset.
You're right. It's not
Yeah,
after that
right,
verb.
right.
Yeah. I was construing it as an ACI, but that's not good after posset. Yeah.
Yep, that's
You're
right. Good.
Okay, I was mistaken. I thought it was Save Ferret, like somehow bearing himself,
Well, it's
carrying himself of the visitors.
right. That is completely idiomatic, but not with.
Not with posset.
Not with.
Yeah, no, it's post-set, right.
It has to be the object of frequentantium.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's right. Good call. That's
Yeah,
right.
well
I
spotted.
didn't get that to start with.
Okay.
Okay, this is section 4 in chapter 10. Qui locus tam secretus et remotus erat, ut eremi solitudinem desideraret. Qui locus, which place, or even that place, was so isolated and remote that it was not lacking the solitude of the desert.
Is it not that he wasn't missing the solitude of the desert?
That's what I
I
thought.
like that better.
Oh, okay. I like that better too. Okay.
That-
So he wasn't missing the solitude of the desert.
Right.
Or even that he wouldn't miss desideraret. That he, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
That he, okay.
of his reclusivity.
Ex uno enim latre, praecissa montes excelsi rupe ambiebatur. Ex uno enim latre. For on one side, it was surrounded, ambiebatur, by the sheared off cliff, the cut off cliff of a high mountain.
Mm-hmm.
reliquam planetium liger fluvius reducto paulum sinu clauserat. The Liger, or the Loire, it's hard, it's easier to say it in Latin. The Liger, the river, had enclosed the remaining plain in a curve, having been drawn back a little, or literal, or sort of expressed differently, kind of in a bend of the river.
In a little old bend of the river. Right. It had closed off the rest of the plain that was there. Right. So some of it's cut off by the cliff.
The rest by
Anything
the
that
river.
isn't cut off by the cliff is cut off by this little bend in the river.
Yeah, the Loire at this point runs from Tours proper a bit toward the southwest, and this sanctuary of Martin's is almost due west of the city. So there's a little bend in the river. There's really not much land between the shrine, what's now the shrine, and the riverbank.
Have you been?
I've been.
Oh, cool.
For only half a day. I really want to go back.
I wanted to ask a question.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Up at where's ut erimini solitudinem non desert, the eremi meaning the desert. I know in the Bible, because I've looked this up, there's desertum and then there's this eremus, and it's used significantly less. Like desertum is used thousands of times, and then this one's only used a very handful of times. So do you see any difference between the two words, or why he would have gone from eremus instead of desertum?
It's Greek, and it's related to the word for monk.
Right. Okay. Aromatic. Okay.
Yeah, so in anything monastic in the Middle Ages, you're going to see aramum and I'd say you'd say aramum 90% of the time and desertum 10% of the time, and it may well be reversed classically.
I would.
Okay.
Desertum was physical. I mean, it means wilderness. You have to.
Yeah, but so does Aramus.
Right.
But doesn't it really? But Aramus really deep down means all by yourself, doesn't it? Maybe.
Well, maybe that's the Greek meaning.
That's the Greek meaning.
Yeah. So in that sense, yes, but it really just means wilderness.
Aramus does.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to ask because it's so the opposite in the Vulgate, and so to see it, I didn't know if there's a significance.
Yeah.
But if you're saying that in the more and more literature they're using eremus, then that makes sense. So thank you.
Especially when it comes to anything monastic. Yeah.
Eremus is also in the Vulgate, according to Lewis and Short.
So yes, there's some.
It is. It's very few, and it's also like in Life of Benedict, and I mean, it's definitely used. It's just very rare in the Vulgate, particularly. Very rare.
So the adjective Aramitic is still used as current as English, modern English, right? From the same source. Talking more about their lifestyle, like a monk, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to say it very.
Voluntary.
You find English.
Sounds okay.
Hardly ever comes up. Good. Keep going.
Great.
So, Clauserat. Una tantum iadamque arta admodum via adiri poterat. It was able to be approached by one route only, and the same one, iadamque, quite narrow. Ipse ex lignis contextum cellulam habebat. He himself, meaning Martin, used to have a cell built of wood. Multique ex fratribus in eundem modum, and many of the brothers understood lived in the same manner, in the same way. Plerique saxo superiecti montis cavato receptaculus sibi fecerant. Plerique, very many, fecerant, had fashioned shelters for themselves, sibi, out of the rock of the overhanging mountain, or the rock of the overhanging mountain having been hollowed out.
Right, Abbot of Absolute. Right.
After the rock had been hollowed
Good.
out. Discipuli fere octoginta erant, qui ad exemplum beati magistri instituebantur. There were almost 80 disciples, followers, who instituebantur were being established in accordance with the example of the Blessed Master. Nemo ibi quicquam proprium habebat, omnia in medium conferebantur. No one there used to have quicquam proprium, any property or anything particular. All things, conferebantur, used to be brought together in medium for the common good, or into the middle, literally.
Yeah.
Non emere aut vendere ut pledisque monachis moris es, quicquam licebat. Non licebat, it was not permitted to buy, either to buy or to sell, as it is of custom, but as it is of mortis, as it is of custom, or as is customary with very many monks. Ars ibi exceptis scriptoribus nullo habebatur, cui tamen operi minor aetas deputabatur, maiores orationi vacabant. No art was had or was practiced there, habebatur. The scribes having been accepted, the ones working in the scriptoria, cui, for which the younger age group used to be considered for work, meaning in the scriptorium. Maiores, the older ones, the maiores, the older men, used to have time for prayer.
Yep. Can I ask a question? Is about this ut plerisque monachis moris est?
Yeah, I had trouble with that kind of. I got the sense of it, but I didn't know how to.
Do we think that means that it wasn't allowed to buy or sell anything, as it's not allowed to buy or sell things among most monks?
No, I think I took it that most monks can.
All right.
But they can't.
That's what I thought. I mean, but I'm reading through the lens of the Rule of St. Benedict, which is 150 years later. But is there a reason why it could not be grammatically? I'm just curious. Is there a reason why it grammatically could not be? It wasn't allowed for them to buy or sell anything, as is the way of most monks.
No, it could.
Jen?
It certainly could mean that.
It could.
I certainly wouldn't know which one to tell you is right.
Well, I'm pretty sure that it's saying most monks do buy and sell, but I was just wondering if there was any grammatical. Jen, you don't think there's any way that must be what it means?
No, I think it could mean either one.
Another question, the cui and operi go together, right? To which work the minor age used to be assigned. Right, cui operi.
Sorry, I'm just answering a question from Kanan. Everything okay? We got it all?
Yep.
Okay. In general, people notice that monasticism at this period hasn't developed this kind of self-sufficiency, that these are kind of rich guys who are giving, are being supported or giving up their wealth, but they're not worrying about being
self-sufficient, right?
Self-sufficient the way monasteries will become interested.
But A Benedictine monastery is sufficient, but that didn't prevent buying and selling
Right.
of things. So in other words, you could be self-sufficient without being totally divorced from commerce.
Right. But these guys are being much more personally.
They it seems like they are totally divorced from commerce, right?
But I read that they gave the rich people gave their money to the church. That Martin didn't have any scruples about that, and that the money they were used was supporting them in general.
Right.
Yeah.
They weren't living in the kind of poverty that we think of.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's for spirituality, so they can focus on something else. Yeah.
Right. Anybody want to finish chapter? Do we push on and do chapters 7, 8, 9 and finish?
I can do them.
Okay.
Before we go on, I just wanted to say, Mona, I thought it was so nice how you got so many of the imperfects and didn't just translate them all as simple past. I really
like the tenses here because there's such a mixture of tenses between jumping back and forth between imperfect or past tense and then to the present tense, historical presence. So
and then there's historical presence too. Yeah.
Come and take our classes with it. We love people who care about tenses.
It's so nice when people do it correctly.
Thank you. Sometimes it's hard to get the imperfect sense down. Literally, it's kind of like they slipped.
But you have to care, right? That's
right. That's the hallmark.
Yeah.
All right, Bruce, take it away.
So raris quiquam extra cellulam suum egressus, nisi cum ad locum orationis conveniebant. Let's see. Rare was the departure for anyone outside his cell. That means it was rare for anyone to leave his cell. Except when they came together at the place of prayer. Suggestion being here that they live in these little tiny receptacula, but they come together for common prayer on a regular basis, which may be once a day or several times a day. I don't know.
Nice imperfect there.
Yeah, right. Came together when they were coming together.
Would come together.
Kept on coming together.
Yeah, but would come to
when they would come together for prayer. That we would say that in
when
English.
they would that's it. When they would come to that's okay. Yeah. Quibum una omnes post oram iunii accipiebant. They literally took food, had a meal together, adverbial. They all had a meal together after the time of fasting. In other words, it seems like in this community there's a declared time of daily fasting, which may vary according to the season. If it's Lent, if it's not Lent, maybe you fast until the middle of the day. If it's Lent, maybe until you fast. It's hard to know. And
again, they would take food. That would be nice in English for the imperfect.
I'm a little worried about would, though.
It's just an idiom in English.
It's a very refined idiom. I think that's the trouble you're running into, Joanna. The number of people in America who say they would do it, I think it's just fact.
Yeah, it can be confused for
very literary. I mean, it's very elegant.
Yeah.
So I think for our purposes, it's great. It gets that imperfect.
Yeah, would is absolutely a correct and good translation, and it's the right one here, I think. It's just that it confuses Latin 1 because then they can't tell it apart from the subjunctive. And
if you just say it casually and fast, then they won't confuse it. Like if you say they would come together to eat after they had fasted. They'd come together. It's not would in the sense of if you focus on the word would. It's just our idiom in English for saying every day they would come together to eat.
Right, but it's hard enough to get the wood thing.
Yeah, but I could see what Jen means about teaching this being totally confusing.
Yeah.
Vinum nemo noverat, nisi quem infirmitas coegiset. No one would know wine. No one knew wine. Except whom sickness had forced to it, had driven to it. And that's a pluperfect, isn't it?
Yep. Pluperfect subjunctive relative clausive characteristic.
Okay, characteristic is
person whom.
So plerique camelorum saetis vestiebantur. Molior ibi habitus pro crimine erat. Plerique. Most of them dressed themselves literally in camel hair. So camel hair garments.
Yep.
Sounds a little exotic for me if you're up there in France.
It doesn't mean, it means real camel hair, right?
Yeah, it's like John the Baptist.
So. Right.
Yeah, hair shirt.
Yeah, but can't you find something itchy a little closer to home?
It does seem odd, but
There was a note in Fontaine that this was very common and that people did this.
Yes.
How did they get it without buying or selling?
That's
They can buy and sell collectively. They just can't buy and sell individually.
They put in a bulk order for camel hair.
or the money that comes to the church is spent on
I think that there's a misinterpretation of the buying and selling.
Yeah.
There's a buying and selling is more like up to like New Testament standards where Acts of the Apostles, everything would be gathered together and distributed.
Right.
And it's not like you couldn't do anything. It's just everything was first brought together. Then you could trade, you could do whatever, but everything in common, not individual.
Right, and this is actually different. Augustine, at the same time, in Africa, has a much more mellow monastery going in Hippo, right? He's got people who are buying and selling, who do have their own property, I think, and who certainly have silverware on the table and are just basically, they're just being less monastic. They're coming together, they're like aristocrats coming together for prayer and study, as opposed to hermits coming together for prayer and study.
I think a term that's used is like synebdotic versus anachronite. You know, these Augustine's more of a synebdotic, Benedict's synebdotic, but Martin's always been considered a step above the wrong word, but he's more detached, he's more eremitic, but he still has connections to the state. He still goes in to be a bishop.
Right, and this community of his, it seems, you know, they don't all live in one building and sleep in one room. They all have their own little cells, you know.
Like Antony.
With a wooden roof or carved out of the side of the hill or something like that. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of Life of Antony, only this is more of a city version of it.
Yeah.
The upscale version of the Pillars.
Suburban version, anyway.
Yes.
Now, William, in Hippo, did they wear hippo hair garments?
Terrible.
I think hippos have hair.
You're just trying to avoid translating.
A softer habit or garment there was understood as an offense. Quod eo magis sit mirum necesse est, quod multi intereos nobiles habebantur, qui longe aliter educati ad hanc se humilitatem et patientiam coegerunt. pluresque ex eis hostea episcopos fidimos. Yeah. Okay, so this is weird. What it is necessary to be even more remarkable, a thing that must be even more remarkable. Right?
I'm not sure if you're getting AO right. The AO, doesn't the AO...
That much more remarkable.
AO quad.
Right. The AO gets picked up by the quad. It's so much more amazing because of the reason that. So it has, and you're right, the Nikese est is what actually I find tricky. So which thing has to be that much more?
I found it easier
because of the reason that.
I found it easier to think of it this way. If you supply putare and an ut, if you say necesse est putare ut sit mirum magis eo quad.
Okay.
I don't know if
that much more marvelous because. Yeah. Okay, that helps. Right. Because many of
not that the grammar really needs it, but the meaning kind of does.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That much more marvelous.
It is standard to have just a subjunctive after Nikese est.
After Nikese, right.
But meaning-wise, it's kind of a shorthand. We have to consider it all the more amazing because, you know, we have to realize that it's all the more amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not actually necessary for it to be all the more amazing. That's why I found that helpful, just meaning-wise.
Oh, sorry.
I thought it was clear enough as it was.
I'm now mixed up again, Frank.
The thing I thought was a little odd about it was the two quads that were different. The first quad referring back to the thing he just said, and then the quad meaning because.
Mm-hmm.
That,
In the first clause, quad goes with mirum or not?
Yes. Which it has.
It is necessary that this quad be all the more amazing.
All the more amazing because, right. Yeah, that's how I took it. Okay.
Yeah.
Because many of them were considered nobles.
Mm-hmm.
Who brought up in a far different way.
Mm-hmm.
Who were literally having been brought up in a far different way, had literally driven themselves to this humility and endurance and patience.
Good.
Many of them afterwards we saw as bishops.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Quam enim esset, where is my last line? Civitas aut ecclesia, quae non sibi de Martini monasterio cuperet sacerdotum. So, which city or church, for which city or church was there that did not desire to have for itself a priest from Martin's monastery?
Good.
But the esset there, it's subjunctive. It's a potential. What city or church?
Would not.
Yeah.
Would not.
What church
Right.
wouldn't want?
Yeah. What church does not? If it's a characteristic, does it have to be would not?
But it's the esset. It's that first esset.
Which church would there be that would not? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What a nice note to end on.
Okay, good. All right. I'm not sure what's happening. That's all great, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, terrific.
Sure, Kanan. I'm sorry, I can't deal with this. Kanan, we'll talk. I'm just talking to, I think, our one member of the audience. Kanan, we can go over this on Wednesday. I'm not sure. I'm going off grid next Sunday, so I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to convene us. I don't know if somebody else can convene us because that might get complicated. So I think we may just have to have a bye week. We were talking about doing it on Tuesday as well to try and make up time. I don't know if people want to do that or not.
It's fine with me.
We could do a quick session on Tuesday, and just if people don't show up, those of us who show up will do it.
Yeah, why don't you set a very not ambitious list for.
All right, I'll do that, and if we'll just see what happens. This is a very small but enthusiastic crowd. So nice to meet you, Masha. Nice to see you all again.
Thank you.
And I'll and let me say this. Okay, good, Kanan. Sorry, yes. Kanan's been sending questions on the Q&A, and one thing I realized is I cannot do this and do Q&A at the same time. So maybe that's just, I don't know what to do about that. Anyhow, it's great to see you all. Good night, and I'll set something up for Tuesday.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, William.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.